The Galactic Academy of Martial Sciences floated in the darkness of space like a small moon. It was a massive station, built by many alien races working together. Students from over 100 different planets came here to learn how to fight, how to survive, and how to become warriors. The station had been teaching young aliens for 3,000 years. It was the most famous school in the entire galaxy. On this particular morning, the first-year students gathered in a huge room called Forge Hall. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls were lined with every kind of tool and material that anyone could imagine. There were metals that glowed with inner light. There were crystals that sang when touched. There were machines that could build anything in seconds. It was a place of wonders. Instructor Velos stood at the front of the hall. He was a tall, insect-like creature with 4 arms and wings that shimmered like oil on water. His eyes were made of thousands of tiny lenses, and they could see things that other beings could not. He had taught at the academy for 200 years, and he had seen students from every corner of the galaxy. "Today begins your blade trial," Velos announced. His voice was like the sound of wind through dry leaves. "You have 3 days. Your task is simple. Craft a weapon. A blade. It must be worthy of your species and your heritage. This is your first great test." The students looked at each other with excitement. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The blade trial was famous throughout the galaxy. Every great warrior who graduated from the academy had passed this test. The students began to move toward the resource stations. There were so many of them, and they were all so different from each other. Tammin was a reptilian being from a world called the Scorched Lands. His planet was a place of fire and volcanic rock, and his people had scales that could withstand incredible heat. He walked with pride toward the plasma forges, where metals could be shaped using contained fire hotter than the surface of a star. His tail swished behind him as he selected rare alloys that would become a blade of burning light. Bora came from a water world. Her body was soft and flowing, with skin so clear that you could see her blue blood moving beneath it. She moved like a dancer toward the biological materials section. There, she found living coral that could be shaped and hardened into crystals sharper than any metal. Her blade would grow and adapt, becoming stronger with each use. The twins from the Luminary race floated toward the light-reactive metals. They were small creatures, no bigger than a human hand, with wings like butterflies made of starlight. Their blades would be made of frozen light, beautiful and deadly at the same time. Dohan was from a heavy world, a planet with gravity so strong that only the toughest beings could survive there. He was massive, with skin like gray stone and muscles that could crush metal. He walked slowly toward the dense materials section, where he would forge a blade that matched his incredible strength. Every student knew what they wanted. Every student moved with purpose, except one. Yuna stood alone near the entrance of Forge Hall. She was human, 17 years old, with black hair tied back and dark eyes that watched everything carefully. She was the first human ever to attend the academy. Her planet, Earth, had only recently been contacted by the galactic community. Humans were new. Humans were unknown. And to most of the other students, humans were primitive. She could hear them whispering about her. They did not try to hide their words. "Look at her. No claws. No natural weapons. Soft skin. How do they even survive on their planet? I heard humans do not even have natural armor. They are like prey animals. Why did the academy even accept her? It must be some kind of experiment." Yuna heard all of this. She kept her face calm. She had learned long ago that showing anger or hurt only made things worse. Instead, she watched. She studied. This was what humans did. They watched and they learned. She walked past the plasma forges where Timon was already beginning his work. She walked past the biological materials, where Bora was singing to her coral in a language of bubbles and clicks. She walked past the light-reactive metals and the rare crystals and the smart machines that could analyze and build anything. She stopped at the back of the hall, near the waste disposal area. The kitchen staff had left their refuse bins near the recycling chutes. Inside one of the bins, among vegetable scraps and other garbage, Yuna saw what she was looking for. A bone dot. It was a large bone, probably from some kind of space cattle that had been served for breakfast. It was dirty and covered with bits of meat and fat. It smelled bad, but Yuna could see its potential. It was a femur bone, the thigh bone of a large animal. It was dense and strong, the kind of bone that supported great weight. She reached in and pulled it out. The students nearby stopped what they were doing. They stared at her. What is she doing? Someone asked. Is she going to eat it? Maybe humans are scavengers, like the creatures that eat dead things. Yuna ignored them. She carried the bone to a small workstation in the corner of the hall. There, she found a simple rock and a container of sand. She sat down on the floor, crossed her legs, and began to work. First, she cleaned the bone. She used water and her bare hands to scrape away the meat and fat. It took a long time, and her fingers became raw and red. But she did not stop. She worked until the bone was white and clean. Then she began to shape it. She held the rock in one hand and the bone in the other. She scraped the rock against the bone. A tiny bit of bone dust fell away. She turned the bone slightly and scraped again. More dust fell. This was how her ancestors had made their first tools. Before they had metal. Before they had fire. Before they had anything except their brains and their hands and their will to survive. They had picked up bones and rocks, and they had made weapons. Scrape. Turn. The other students watched for a while, then lost interest. There was nothing interesting about watching someone rub a rock against a bone. They went back to their own projects, to their plasma forges and their living coral and their frozen starlight. But Yuna continued. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. Turn. Her fingers began to bleed. She tore strips from her sleeve and wrapped them around her hands. Then she continued working. The first day passed. The second day began. And still, Yuna sat in her corner, scraping her bone with a rock, ignored by everyone. But she was not worried. She knew something that the others did not. She knew that the most dangerous creature in any room is not the one with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. It is the one that never gives up. By the second day, everyone in the academy had heard about the human girl and her bone. Students from other classes came to Forge Hall just to look at her. They pressed their faces against the observation windows and pointed. They laughed and whispered and shook their heads. Some of them recorded videos on their communication devices and sent them to their friends on other planets. You have to see this, they said. The human is making her blade from garbage. She is sitting on the floor like an animal, rubbing a rock against a bone. It is the saddest thing I have ever seen. Inside the hall, Yuna continued her work. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. Turn. She did not look up at the windows. She did not react to the laughter. She simply worked. Tamin stood with a group of his friends, watching through the glass. His plasma blade was almost complete. It was a beautiful thing, a curved sword that glowed with inner fire. When he held it, it hummed with power. The blade was so hot that it could cut through starship armor like a knife through soft fruit. She does not understand the assignment, Tamin said, his scales rippling with amusement. She thinks we are children playing in the dirt. Does she not know what century this is? Maybe she cannot use the machines, suggested one of his friends, a creature with 6 legs and fur the color of midnight. Maybe human brains are too primitive to understand technology. That must be it, Tamin agreed. We should feel sorry for her. Her species is so far behind. They'd probably still think fire is impressive. Bora floated nearby. Her coral blade was already finished. It hung at her side, glowing with soft blue light. The living crystal pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. It was both beautiful and deadly. "Perhaps we should tell Instructor Velos," Bora said. Her voice was like water flowing over stones. "She clearly does not have the mental ability to complete the assignment. He should give her different materials, simpler tools, something she can understand. Or just send her home," Tiemann said. "Humans do not belong here. They are not ready for the galaxy. Maybe in another 1,000 years." The group laughed, but not everyone joined in. Doan stood apart from the others, his massive arms crossed over his stone-like chest. He was watching Yuna through the glass, and his face showed no amusement. "Leave her alone." The others turned to look at him. Dawan rarely spoke. He was from a heavy world where talking wasted energy that was needed just to move. When he did speak, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "She knows what she is doing." Dawan said "TAEMI" and laughed again, but this time it sounded less certain. "And what exactly is that? Making a toothpick? A toy for a child?" Dawan did not answer right away. He continued watching Yuna. She had not moved from her spot in over 20 hours. She had not eaten. She had barely drunk any water. She just kept scraping, patient, steady, endless. "I do not know," Dohan admitted finally, "but there is something in her eyes. Something I have seen before." "Where?" Bora asked. Doan was silent for a moment. "On my world, there are creatures that live in the deepest caves. They have no eyes, no claws, no armor. They should have died out millions of years ago. But they survive. They survive because they never stop moving, never stop trying, never stop hunting." He paused. "She has the same look. The look of something that will not quit, no matter what." The others were quiet. Then Taman shook his head. "You are being dramatic. She is just a primitive human playing with garbage. Tomorrow, at the trial, she will stand there with her little bone stick and everyone will see the truth. Humans are not warriors. They are prey." He walked away, and the others followed him. But Doan stayed a moment longer, watching. Inside Forge Hall, Yuna continued to work. Her bone was changing now. It no longer looked like a random piece of garbage. One edge was becoming flat and thin. The tip was becoming sharp and pointed. The handle was becoming smooth and comfortable to hold, but the work was hard. So very hard. Her hands were covered in blisters. Some of the blisters had broken open, and her blood mixed with the bone dust and sand. The pain was constant, a burning feeling that went from her fingers up to her shoulders. Every movement hurt Dodd. A normal person would have stopped. A normal person would have asked for different materials. A normal person would have admitted defeat. But Yuna was human. And humans had not survived for 200,000 years by giving up. When things were hard, she thought about her ancestors as she worked. She thought about the first humans living on the plains of Africa millions of years ago. They had nothing. No claws, no fangs. No armor, no venom. They were small and weak compared to the lions and the wolves and the bears. But they had survived. They had survived by being smart, by working together, by making tools, by refusing to give up even when everything seemed impossible. The first tool a human ever made was probably a lot like this bone knife. Some ancient grandmother, sitting by a river, picking up a bone and a rock and scraping them together. She did not know she was starting a journey that would take her descendants to the stars. She just knew that she needed something sharp, and she was willing to work until she had it. Yuna was her daughter, her granddaughter, her heir. Scrape, turn, scrape, Turned out the hours passed. The other students finished their projects and left to rest. The lights in Forge Hall dimmed for the night cycle. But Una did not stop Dot. She worked through the night. Her eyes burned with tiredness. Her body ached for sleep. But she kept going. Dot, by the morning of the third day, her knife was almost complete. Dot, it was beautiful in its simplicity. No lights, no power source, no advanced technology. Just bone, shaped by human hands, made sharp by human patience. The edge caught the light and gleamed. The point was fine enough to pierce fabric. The handle fit perfectly in her palm, as if the bone had been made for her. She held it up and looked at it. She felt a connection to every human who had ever lived. Every grandmother and grandfather. Every mother and father. Every child who had ever picked up a rock and tried to make something useful. This is what we are, she thought. This is what we have always been. We are the ones who do not give up. We are the ones who find a way. Outside the observation window, a small crowd had gathered for the final day of the trial. They were still laughing, still pointing, still expecting to see the human girl fail. Una stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long. Her hands shook slightly from exhaustion and pain, but she smiled. Let them laugh, she thought. Let them think I am nothing. Let them believe their fancy machines and their advanced technology make them better than me. Today. They will learn what a human can do with nothing but a bone and the will to survive. She walked toward the exit, her bone knife held carefully in her bandaged hands. The trial was about to begin. The morning of the third day arrived with the artificial sunrise that the Academy used to mark time. Golden light filled Forge Hall as hundreds of students and teachers gathered for the Blade trial presentations. This was one of the most important events of the Academy year, and everyone wanted to see what the first-year students had created. Instructor Velos stood on a raised platform at the center of the hall. Behind him was the testing area, where each student would demonstrate their weapon. The main test target was a block of asteroid iron, a material so dense and strong that it was used to build starship armor. Cutting through it was considered the mark of a truly excellent blade. "Welcome to the Blade trial," Velos announced. His thousand-lens eyes swept across the crowd. "Today, our first-year students will present the weapons they have crafted. Remember, this is not just a test of the blade itself. It is a test of understanding, a test of creativity, a test of who you are." The crowd murmured with excitement. The first student was called Ford. Teeman. Scorched worlds. Reptilian species. Tamman walked to the platform with his head held high. In his clawed hands, he carried his plasma blade. It was magnificent. The curved sword glowed with contained fire, and waves of heat rose from its surface. When he activated it fully, the blade burst into brilliant orange light, and the nearby spectators stepped back from the warmth. "I present the Fire Fang," Tamman announced proudly. Forged in plasma fires hotter than the heart of a star. The blade can cut through any material known to the galaxy. It is worthy of my people, who were born in fire and shaped by flame. He approached the asteroid iron block. With a single smooth motion, he swung his blade. The plasma edge passed through the iron as if it were nothing but smoke. The block fell into two pieces, the cut surfaces glowing red-hot. The crowd cheered. Instructor Velos nodded with approval. "Excellent work," he said. "The plasma containment is stable, and the cutting power is impressive." Tamman returned to his place, smiling with satisfaction. He glanced toward where Una stood in the back of the crowd. His smile grew wider. Soon, everyone would see how ridiculous her bone knife was compared to his Fire Fang. Bora, Waterworld, aquatic species. Bora floated to the platform. Her coral blade hung at her side, pulsing with soft blue light. Unlike the dramatic fire of Tamman's weapon, Her blade was quiet and gentle-looking, but appearances were deceiving. "I present the living edge," Bora said, her voice like flowing water. "This blade is grown from the coral of my home world. It is alive. It learns. Each time it cuts, it remembers and adapts. It finds weaknesses that other weapons miss." She approached a different target, a block of layered materials designed to have no obvious weak points. She touched her blade to the surface, almost gently. The living coral seemed to think for a moment. Then it moved on its own, finding microscopic gaps between the layers, slipping through them like water through sand. The block fell apart into a dozen pieces. The crowd applauded. Instructor Velos made notes on his datapad. "Remarkable adaptation abilities," he commented. "The blade's intelligence is highly developed." One by one, the students presented their weapons. The Luminary twins showed their blades of frozen starlight, which could cut through shadows and darkness itself. A gaseous being from a cloud world presented a weapon made of compressed wind, sharp enough to slice through metal. A silicon-based life form demonstrated a blade that existed partially in another dimension, making it impossible to block or dodge. Each presentation was more impressive than the last. Each weapon was a marvel of alien technology and creativity. The crowd cheered and clapped and marveled at the wonders they were seeing. Finally, only one student remained. Kang Yuna, Earth, human species. The hall fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Not because they expected to see something impressive, but because they expected to see something embarrassing. The human girl with her garbage bone knife. Yuna walked to the platform. Her steps were steady and calm. Her face showed no fear, no embarrassment, no anger. She simply walked, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. In her bandaged hands. She held her bone knife. It was white and simple, about the length of her forearm. One edge was flat and sharp. The tip was pointed. There was nothing else. No glow, no power source, no special materials. Just bone. Someone in the crowd laughed. The laugh spread quickly. Soon, many people were laughing. They pointed at the knife. They pointed at Yuna. They whispered to each other about how sad this was, how pathetic, how the human clearly did not belong here. But Yuna did not react. She stood still and waited for the laughter to die down. Instructor Velos raised one of his forearms for silence. The hall became quiet again. "Present your weapon, human," Velos said. His voice was neutral. He was not mocking her, but he was not encouraging her either. He simply wanted to see what she would do. "On my world," Yuna said, "we call this tool many names. Knife, blade, shiv, point." She held it up so everyone could see. "But the most important name is the oldest. My ancestors called it the first friend, because before we had fire, before we had language, before we had anything else, we had this. A sharp edge made from bone or stone. This is what made us human." "Fascinating history lesson," Taman called out from the crowd. "But this is a weapon trial, not a lecture. Can your little bone actually cut anything?" There were more laughs. Yuna ignored them. "May I approach the test target?" she asked Instructor Velos. Velos gestured toward the asteroid iron block. It had been replaced with a fresh one after Taman's demonstration. The block was perfect, solid, unbroken. Yuna walked toward it. But she did not walk directly to the front, as the other students had done. Instead, she walked slowly around the block. She looked at it from different angles. She knelt down and examined the base. She stood up and studied the top. She walked behind it and looked at how it was attached to the platform. The crowd watched, confused. What was she doing? Why was she not attacking? Finally, Yuna returned to the front of the block. But she did not strike at the main surface. Instead, she dropped to one knee and looked at the point where the block met the platform. There was a tiny gap there, almost invisible. The mounting hardware created a small space, just a few millimeters wide. She had seen this gap 2 days ago. When she first entered Forge Hall, she had been watching it ever since. She had also watched Taemin's demonstration the day before. She had seen how his plasma blade created heat, and she knew that extreme heat caused metal to expand and then contract. This created stress fractures, tiny cracks that were invisible to the eye, but present in the structure of the metal dot. Now, she inserted the tip of her bone knife into the tiny gap at the base of the block. She pressed gently. She found the angle where the stress fractures would be weakest. Then she pushed. The bone knife did not break. It had been shaped and hardened perfectly. The tip was exactly the right angle to act as a wedge. The asteroid iron block groaned. It was a sound that metal makes when it is being forced to move in a way it does not want to move. Then a cracked dot, not along the surface, where everyone expected weapons to cut, but along the internal stress lines that only Yuna had been watching. The block split into 3 pieces and fell to the platform with a crash that echoed through the silent hall. No one laughed now. No one spoke. Yuna stood up and stepped back. She held her bone knife at her side. It was not broken, not even scratched. It had done exactly what she needed it to do. Instructor Velos approached the fallen pieces of asteroid iron. His 1,000 eyes examined the break patterns. His 4 hands touched the surfaces, feeling the fracture lines. "How?" he asked finally. His voice was filled with genuine surprise. This iron was rated to withstand a Class 7 impact force. Your bone should have shattered on contact. Yuna met his gaze calmly. "I did not fight the iron," she said. "I understood it, and I found its weakness." The hall remained silent, but now the silence was different. It was not the silence of mockery. It was the silence of shock. The silence of minds trying to understand what they had just seen. A human girl with a bone knife had broken asteroid iron, not through strength, not through superior technology, not through any advantage that the aliens could recognize. She had broken it through patience, through observation, through the simple human ability to watch, to learn, and to find a way. The silence in Forge Hall lasted for a long time. Students and teachers stared at the broken asteroid iron. They stared at the small human girl with her simple bone knife. They tried to understand what had just happened. Instructor Velos was the first to speak. He moved closer to Yuna, his compound eyes studying her with new interest. "Explain," he said. "Explain what you did. I have taught the blade trial for 200 years. I have seen weapons of every design. I have never seen anyone do what you just did." Yuna nodded. She turned to face the crowd. Every eye was on her now, but not with mockery. With curiosity, with confusion, with something that might have been the beginning of respect. "For 3 days, Yuna began, I sat in my corner and worked on my knife. Everyone laughed at me. They thought I was stupid. They thought I did not understand the assignment. They thought I was too primitive to use the machines and materials." She paused and looked at Taemin, who stood frozen in the crowd. "But I was not just making a knife. I was watching. I was learning. I was understanding." She walked toward the broken pieces of asteroid iron as she spoke. "On the first day, I watched how this block was mounted to the platform. I saw the tiny gap at the base. I memorized its position." She pointed to the mounting hardware. "On the second day, I watched Taemin demonstrate his plasma blade. I saw how the extreme heat affected the metal. Plasma cuts leave thermal stress lines. The metal expands and contracts very fast. This creates tiny cracks inside the structure. They are invisible, but they are there. Timon's scales changed color slightly. He had not known this. I also watched Bora practice with her coral blade. I heard the sound it made when it struck the iron. I counted the vibrations. Every material has a resonant frequency. Hit it at the right angle, and you can break it along its weakest lines. Bora's transparent skin flushed with surprise. I did not have a plasma blade. I did not have living coral. I did not have any of the wonderful technology that you have. Yuna held up her bone knife. But I had this. And I had time. And I had patience. She returned to stand before Instructor Velos. On my world, my ancestors did not have claws or fangs or venom. We had no armor. We had no natural weapons. We were small and weak. Everything wanted to kill us. Our voice was calm, but there was power in it now. The power of truth. So we learned to watch. We learned to wait. We learned to find the weakness in everything that wanted to hurt us. And we learned that patience matters more than any other advantage. She held up her bandaged hands. I scraped this bone with a rock for 3 days without stopping. My fingers bled. My muscles ached. Every part of me wanted to give up. She lowered her hands. But I did not give up, because that is what it means to be human. We do not have the best weapons. We do not have the best bodies. But we have something else. We have the will to keep going, no matter what, no matter how hard, no matter how long it takes. The hall was completely silent now. Every student, every teacher, every observer was listening. Instructor Velos spoke again. His voice was different now, softer, more thoughtful. The assignment was to craft a blade worthy of your species' legacy, he said. Yes. Yuna agreed. You have done this. Velos turned to face the entire hall. His wings spread slightly, catching the light. In 3,000 years of the blade trial, I have seen weapons that could cut through dimensions. I have seen blades of frozen time. I have seen swords that could kill gods. But I have never seen a student understand the true purpose of the trial until today. Timon stepped forward, his earlier confidence shaken. What purpose? He asked. It was a test of crafting skill. A test of using materials to make the best possible weapon. No. Velos fixed him with his 1,000-faceted gaze. It was a test of who you are. A test of what you reach for when you are challenged. A test of how you think. He gestured toward Yuna. When I gave this assignment, every student here reached for the best technology, the most advanced materials, the most powerful tools. You all tried to build the most impressive weapon you could imagine. Velos began to walk among the students. But none of you asked the right question. None of you wondered, what makes a weapon truly powerful? Is it the materials? Is it the technology? Is it the heat or the light or the special abilities? He stopped in front of Yuna. Or is it the warrior who wields it? The question hung in the air. This human girl did not have your advantages. She could not use your forges or your machines. She had nothing but a bone and a rock and her own 2 hands. Velos' voice rose. And she beat all of you. Not because her weapon was better. Because she was better. She watched when you were not watching. She thought when you were not thinking. She worked when you were sleeping. He turned back to address the crowd. This is the lesson of the blade trial. The weapon does not make the warrior. The warrior makes the weapon. And the greatest warriors are not those with the sharpest claws or the hottest fire. They are the ones who never give up. The ones who find a way when there is no way. Dawan nodded slowly from his place in the crowd. He had seen it from the beginning. The look in Yuna's eyes. The look of something that would not quit. I have taught students from every corner of the galaxy, Velos continued. I have seen species with natural armor that could stop laser fire. I have seen predators with claws that could tear through steel. I have seen beings of pure energy who could think at the speed of light. He paused. And today, I learned something new. I learned that the most dangerous species in the galaxy might be the one with no natural advantages at all. Because they have something else. Something that cannot be measured or forged or grown. He looked at Yuna with what might have been respect. They have 10,000 years of refusing to die. Yuna stood still, her bone knife held at her side. She did not smile. She did not show pride. She simply accepted the instructor's words with the same calm she had shown throughout. But inside, she felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Not because she had proven herself better than the others, but because she had honored her ancestors. She had shown the galaxy what a human could do with nothing but determination and time. Timon approached her slowly. His earlier arrogance was gone. He looked confused and uncertain. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "How did you know the stress lines would be there? How did you know exactly where to strike?" Yuna looked at him. "I watched you," she said simply. "When you made your cut yesterday, I saw where the heat went. I saw how the metal reacted. I remembered, but I did not notice any of that. And I was the one holding the blade. That is because you were thinking about yourself." Yuna's voice was not unkind. "You were thinking about how impressive your weapon was. How everyone was watching you. How you would be the best." She tilted her head. "I was thinking about the iron, about what it would do, about how it would change." She shrugged. "That is the difference." Timon was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He bowed. It was a formal bow, the kind his people gave to respected elders and teachers. A sign of acknowledgement and respect. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I was wrong about humans." One by one, other students began to approach. Some of them had laughed the loudest. Some of them had said the cruelest things. But now they came with questions, with curiosity, with a new understanding that the galaxy was bigger and stranger than they had imagined. And at the center of it all stood Yuna, a small human girl with a bone knife, who had shown them all what it truly meant to be a warrior. 50 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The great empires that had ruled for thousands of years began to fall. Old enemies became friends. Old friends became enemies. And in the chaos, a new threat emerged. They called themselves the Void. No one knew where they came from. Some said they crawled out of the darkness between galaxies. Some said they had always been there, waiting. What everyone knew was that they were powerful beyond measure. Their ships could swallow stars. Their weapons could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. And they wanted everything. One by one, the great civilizations fell. The scorched worlds burned. The fire that had shaped the reptilian people for millions of years turned against them. Tammin, now an old warrior with gray scales, watched his homeworld die. He escaped with only a handful of survivors. The water worlds froze. The void drained the heat from the oceans, turning entire planets into ice. Bora led her people through the dark cold, searching for any place that might be safe. The Luminari faded. The creatures of light found their stars going dark, their energy being stolen by enemies they could not see. The heavy worlds crumbled. Even Dowan's mighty people, with their stone skin and unbreakable strength, could not survive when their very planets were destroyed. Across the galaxy, millions died. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years vanished in months. The advanced technology that everyone had been so proud of was useless against an enemy that seemed to come from nightmares. And in this darkness, Earth became a beacon. General Kang Yuna stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Persistence. She was 67 years old now. Her black hair had turned gray, and her face was lined with the marks of a long life. But her eyes were the same, dark and watchful, patient and determined. Around her neck, she wore a pendant. It was a small knife made of bone, worn smooth by decades of handling. She touched it often when she needed to think. "General," her aide said, "the Void Fleet is approaching. 300 ships. They will be in weapons range in 6 hours." Yuna nodded calmly. "What are our numbers?" 42 ships, General. We are outnumbered 7 to 1. The officers on the bridge exchanged worried glances. But Yuna did not seem worried. She looked out the view screen at the approaching enemy fleet. The void ships were black and huge, like mountains floating in space. They absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Looking at them made your eyes hurt. Incoming communication from the Void Commander. The communications officer reported. "Put it through." The view screen flickered. A figure appeared, but it was hard to look at. It seemed to shift and change constantly, as if it was not entirely real. "Humans," the Void Commander said. Its voice was like static and screaming mixed together. "You are the last. All others have fallen. Surrender now, and we will make your end quick. Resist, and we will make you suffer for eternities." Yuna stepped forward. "I have a message for you as well," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "Speak, little creature. My ancestors survived ice ages that froze the world. They survived predators with teeth as long as their arms. They survived diseases that killed millions. They survived wars and famines and disasters that should have ended us 100 times over." She touched her bone pendant. "Do you know what they said to each extinction event? Do you know what they told every force that tried to end them?" The Void Commander waited. "They said, 'We are still here, and we are not finished.'" She nodded to her communications officer, who cut the connection. "General," her aide said quietly, "we cannot win this battle through conventional means. Our weapons are not strong enough. I know." Yuna walked to the tactical display. "That is why we are not going to fight a conventional battle." She began giving orders. They were strange orders, unexpected orders, orders that made no sense to anyone who was thinking in traditional terms. "Move our ships into formation Delta 7, not attack formation. Defense, General?" "Yes, I want the enemy to think we are afraid. I want them to think we are giving up." Her eyes narrowed. "Then I want engineering teams to begin emergency reactor modifications. Follow protocol bone knife." Her officers exchanged confused looks, but they obeyed. They had learned long ago to trust their general, even when they did not understand her plans. For the next 5 hours, the human fleet appeared to do nothing. They sat in their defensive formation and waited. The void ships approached closer and closer, confident in their superior numbers. The Void Commander laughed. "They have given up. They know they cannot win. This will be the easiest victory we have ever claimed." But Yuna was not giving up. She was watching. She was waiting. She was looking for the weakness that every enemy had. Because every enemy had a weakness. That was the first lesson she had learned at the academy 50 years ago, and she had found it. The void ships absorbed energy. That was their great strength. Any weapon that hit them only made them stronger. But absorption was not unlimited. There was a point where even the void could take no more. Now, Yuna said quietly. 42 human ships suddenly ejected their reactor cores. The cores flew toward the Void Fleet, not as weapons, but as gifts. The Void ships absorbed them eagerly, taking in the energy. Then they absorbed more, and more, and more. Yuna had spent months building special cores. Cores that did not stop producing energy. Cores that kept feeding and feeding until the system that absorbed them could not handle any more. One by one, the void ships began to destabilize. They had taken too much. They could not stop taking. And now that endless hunger was destroying them from the inside. "All ships, attack now," Una ordered. "Target the command vessel." The human fleet surged forward. They were still outnumbered. They were still outgunned. But now the enemy was confused and hurting. And humans knew how to fight when the odds were against them. They had been doing it for 10,000 years. The battle lasted for 18 hours. It was the hardest fight the human fleet had ever faced. Ships were destroyed. Lives were lost. At one point, the Persistence was hit so hard that half the bridge crew was killed, but they did not give up. When their weapons failed, they found new ones. When their ships were broken, they fought from the wreckage. When all logic said to surrender, they kept fighting, because that is what humans do. When the battle finally ended, the Void Fleet was destroyed. The command vessel floated dead in space. Its commander killed by a boarding party that had fought through the corridors with nothing but basic weapons and human determination. The galaxy watched in disbelief. The force that had destroyed 100 civilizations had been defeated by the newest and weakest species in known space. Yuna stood on the damaged bridge of the Persistence and looked out at the debris field that had once been an invincible enemy fleet. "Send a message to all surviving ships," she said. "Tell them what we told the ice, what we told the predators, what we told the void." "What should the message say, General?" Una smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in months. "Tell them, humanity is still here, and we are not finished." Years later, when Una finally passed away at the age of 103, the galaxy mourned. She had become more than a general. She had become a symbol, a reminder that the weapon does not make the warrior. They built a memorial for her on 100 worlds. Every species she had helped save sent representatives to honor her memory. On her tomb, they inscribed words that would be remembered for thousands of years. She taught the galaxy that the measure of a species is not its claws or its technology. It is the will to keep going when all hope is lost. It is the patience to find a way when there is no way. It is the courage to face any enemy with nothing but determination. And time. She showed us what humans truly are. Not the weakest species in the galaxy, the most dangerous, because they never, ever give up. And beside her name, they carved an image, a simple knife made of bone, the weapon that had shown the galaxy what it truly means to be human.